Well, hey there. It's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol. That's wavetables.lol. And sorry for anybody who's seen my videos before, but in case you don't know what I'm talking about, at wavetables.lol, you will find my ginormous collection of single cycle waveforms and wavetables made with mathematics. That's an ever-growing collection. At this point, it's more than 120,000 wavetables, and I just recently dropped some new ones made with some new techniques, and I'm just going to stop counting. But, if you're looking for the largest collection of interesting wavetables that I think anyone's ever created, well, look no further. You have found it. What I want to talk about today, uh, I guess is a lot of stuff because I like to make these long, talky, rambling videos, don't I? Um, and one thing I see in the comments, like 2 videos ago, I introduced my AI generated wavetables created with variational autoencoders, and there are a couple of comments from people saying like, well, this all kind of sounds the same to me. And I don't take these comments very seriously because these people are obviously like not skilled synthesizer programmers. When you're listening to an oscillator, it's like how are you supposed to audition that, right? Like, yeah, how am I supposed to demonstrate a wavetable to you except by sort of sweeping through it? And of course, that's not just all that's in a synthetic sound, right? A synthesizer patch has a lot more going on in it. Just listening to a raw waveform is really quite irritating. Um, and I think what happens is, especially as I was going through the V wavetables, which are underfit, they don't perfectly fit the training data set, and they are biased toward the kind of bell-like timbres that are dominant in the core KRC Mathwaves set. And that can't be helped. It's something I keep working on. People are like, oh, this kind of all sounds the same. I don't understand like why anyone would like this. So that's why I'm playing a little patch here that's called Samey My Ass. Because in the core Mathwave set, like you can do stuff like this. Like this is a really cool. I don't know who this sounds like, but those are, that's a combination of a sawtooth wave, actually one of my kind of specialized sawtooth waves as part of the collection. And then what is the other one? Oh no, this is a single oscillator patch. Yeah, it's transitioning between a sawtooth wave that's over here in one of my random explorer wavetables, and then with a modulo wave. So, okay. So there's all these kinds of like there's all these kinds of harsh timbres or like kind of classic oscillator timbres that you can find in the collection and that are categorized by the type of synthesis used to create them. But then there's many more waveforms and wavetables that were created with my V techniques. And yeah, those are gonna sound a little bit similar. But anyway, it's like learn to listen and maybe learn something about synthesis is what I would say to people who are like, well, this all just sounds like FM. You can't actually make a lot of the sounds that you can get out of here with FM actually. And the reason that some of these things sound like FM, I don't know. Let's go get this negative Pgon one. So these very bell-like timbres, right, which how this whole project started as an exploration of, they are in fact created with like what's essentially an additive synthesis technique. Like what these things are the polygonal series of harmonics. So what I did was like construct waveforms that have these very specific polygonal number harmonics. If we were to look at, I'm not sharing Chrome right now, but if you were to go to like Wikipedia and search for polygonal number series, what you would learn is that the polygonal numbers are this interesting mathematical sequence, where we take a polygon and the numbers that we put in the series represent like kind of the number of sides, the number of points on a side of the polygon. So for example, like a pentagon generates the series 1, 5, 12, 22, 35. And so that is, you will find like waveforms for like the five-sided n-gon inside of KRC Mathwaves. And this isn't exactly, yeah, it's a slightly different one. But they have this very interesting property. Go down a couple octaves. They're just like super naturally bell-like, and they're a tone that you can only get by having a waveform that has those specific harmonics. And the shapes of these waveforms are interesting as well. They look nothing like what you would think they would sound like. Anyway, blah 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 de blah. Let's see. What I really came here to talk about is not to complain about haters, because haters gonna hate, right? But what I wanted to talk about is some of the new types of waveforms that are in Mathwaves. So again, back to my AI videos. Let's see. What do I want to do here? Let's go to, let's see. Where's Curve Magic? This is a good patch for demonstrating these waveforms. And like obviously there's delay, chorus, and master reverb on this. We're in Modwave native, by the way. These wavetables can be used with all sorts of modern synthesizers, including, as I covered in my last video, now things like Surge XT and Bitwig. The last time I talked about the Vey wavetables, I believe that I had done them up to, let's see, I think we were up to, it was just version 1. So I talked about all these different, I don't know, oops. Not sure what happened there, hold on. We'll have to edit that out, won't we? Looks like Modwave went a little wacky on me. Let's go back here to Curve Magic. All right. So anyway, the last time that I had talked about these Vey wavetables, they were at a version 1 and a bunch of different variations. So when you import these into Modwave, of course, these are also available in .wave format that you can import to all of the common wavetable synthesizers, including Serum and Phase Plant and Vital. Thank you, Vital community, who's really embraced this collection. It's pretty cool, and I did not know about Vital really before that happened. So thanks. Anyway, you can put these in a whole bunch of other synthesizers, including Bitwig Polymer now that we have the WT versions. And the last time I talked about these wavetables, I had these version 1, and there's a bunch of different versions of them, right? So you'll find all of the Vey generated wavetables start with Vey. I put them in a collection that in Modwave that starts with Vey, but you'll find them in their own folders as well if you download the Wave versions. There's different types. There's the curve ones, there's the Bez ones. The Bez ones are generated via like an 8-point Bezier curve that goes through the latent space. The curve ones are a 3-point Bezier curve that goes through the latent space. What are the other categories? There are linear ones, so where we actually just, oops, and I really need to clear that. There are linear ones that just take 2 points in the latent space and morph between it. So let's adjust this a bit. There's a linear one from the 107 collection. Anyway, so there's all these different categories, but I've created some new ones. So since I did that original upload of the Wavetables. I kept working on that project. I've paused it for a little bit because I got a little tired of exploring that. But the version 2 waveforms are in Wavetables are I think they're generally better. At any rate, they offer a bunch of new possibilities. So for example, we'll stick with the curve ones here, but past 119, which was the last version that I added, we've now got versions 1.2, 1.22, 1.23, 1.24, 1.26, 1.27, and 1.28 that all have slightly different properties and were trained in slightly different ways. And I do feel like the diversity is getting a little bit better in the new versions. Some versions are truncated, like you'll see in version 122. Like I didn't do a full complement of curve wavetables, but there's a huge number of the Bezier ones in 1.22. Typically, I do 2048 of these. So these are some of the 122. Now, I think one of the things that maybe caught people's ears, maybe in a negative way, when I released the original Wavetables, is that there is a lot of high frequency content in them. And so one thing that I experimented with as I made new versions is some of them I omitted some of the really high frequency waveforms from the training data set. And so some of them are more tame. So 122, I think, has the full complement of training data, and so you will land on some of these waveforms that have a lot of zero crossings. But of course, those kind of waveforms are very rich, and they're great for filtering, right? Like if we turned our cutoff way down. I know I'm playing my synthesizer face. Anyway, as we go through the versions here, like 123, even a different version here. In 123, turn our cutoff back up here. Right. Let's see, that's 123. I think that's trained on the full complement of things. But then as we get into I think 124 might be one of the first versions. Let's go to the curve ones here. The curve 124. I think this is when I started limiting these. The other thing is these models are more complex. They were trained for a longer amount of time. It's actually been a challenge to get these models to train in such a way that they learn even more and more. It's a tough problem actually modeling waveforms. It's not easy for a machine to learn like, okay, what's a musically useful waveform and how do I produce it? Yeah, I think these are a lot more calm in 124. So those might, float your boat more if you're looking for things that are more like standard synthesis waveform fare. And actually, then I've gone back to new non-AI created wavetables, and I will get to talking about those. And I know I'm so talky. I'm just so talky. Now, I think one of the best of these collections is the highest number, the 128. And so all of these waveforms have V1.28.5 in them. This I think might be my most successful training to date. And one thing I did with these is it does throw out some of the highest frequency waveforms from the training data set, so that these are like a little more tame, but I think this also trained for the longest amount of time. So there's a lot of good, interesting stuff in here. Now, of course, when you're working with wavetables, right? Like, again, when I'm demoing stuff, I'm gonna demo a patch, right, that like sweeps through the wavetable, so you can kind of understand how it's constructed. But there's multiple ways to use a wavetable synthesizer. We might just focus on a single wave, like, and not morph, right? Not morph over the life of the patch. Nice hollow sound there. And of course a lot more buzzy there. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. And so in 128, so this is where some of the new stuff is, I did create some new styles. So you're familiar with the Bezier wavetables, the curve wavetables, the linear wavetables that I made, multilinear. So let's go listen to those. This is multilinear 128. This is where we take several points in the latent space and then interpolate between them using the model. And these have quite a bit of variation across them because, of course, you were sampling, several completely different points in the latent space. If we were just to move through some of these, we hit a lot of different points, right? And then, of course, if we morph, well, that might be useful to us, or we might just want to morph a small amount. And by doing that, we can get things that are actually fairly organic sounding, which is kind of a hallmark of what I've been doing here. Okay, so we talked about the multilinear. There's also, with the 128, I also did a slightly different technique. I made these S-emlin, and the S-emlin wavetables are sorted multilinear. So what I did is we sampled the random points in the latent space of the model, but then we sort them by a rough measure of brightness, the spectral magnitude. And so we sort them by the spectral magnitude and then use the model to morph between them. And this gives us waveforms wavetables where rather than everything being random, they are sort of sorted by their brightness. Now, the spectral magnitude brightness is not exactly how you would think of brightness like with your own ears, but you can hear in these wavetables. Oops. That was way too fast of a morph, right? These generally go from like a higher brightness to a lower brightness. So they are, sort of organic and realistic in that way. Now, of course, no acoustic instrument exactly sounds like this. But these are kind of useful because at least as you go up the waveform or up the wavetable, you are more likely to get a brighter tone. So, right, simple, brighter. And so if you were trying to do something, organic sounding, you would know that you can safely go here and like morph up to the very top of the wavetable. And while that's, impossible, from an acoustic instrument perspective, it is plausible, right? Because this is what we sort of expect to hear. We expect to hear a brighter transient that decays to something lower. And of course, that's why we have filters too. I'm not here to teach you synthesizer programming, but, That's kind of a principle here. Anyway, all right, so those are the sorted M-lins. Oh, one thing I do actually want to warn you about. So I had in my previous video about the AI wavetables, I had showed the orbit wavetables, which are interesting. But as the model has become more sophisticated in these newer versions, so like the the versions above 119, the ones that are 122, 123, whatever. The orbits are like they're less different. So there are a whole bunch of wavetables in the orbit category that are essentially a single wavetable or a single waveform. I'm not proud of that, but it's what happened. Like, let's do this. Let's just listen to one of these. Like, there's very little variation across this wavetable, and I would demo it being modulated with an LFO, but I can't for a certain reason show you that right now. So actually, you can see in this one, you can see that there's variation, but it doesn't make much difference to your ear. So, if you're going to skip downloading something because you're like, this guy and his crazy collection, it's way too big. In these 1, 2, 2 and up versions, you could safely skip the orbits. Although I know there are some people who are like, fascinated by the orbits. And you will still find some ones that have variation across them. But I need to reevaluate just like how we're doing that. The issue is these newer models, the bigger models, they have more dimensions. And what I was doing is randomly picking the dimensions to like draw a circle around. And it's just like, we don't always find dimensions that make a difference to this particular wavetable. So that's, it's a bummer, but there it is. But they are there. They are there. And I have found some interesting things in them, but I just haven't spent a lot of time with them. Another thing that's unique to 128 is, let's see, there's an explore mode, because this version I think was the most useful, I think, in terms of the variety of waveforms that it created. And so there is where is it? So just like, in the original collection, like I've got these Explore 64 wavetables where there are 64 waveforms like selected at random, which is like a fun way to explore the collection and just kind of zero in on specific waveforms. But each one is different. I did the same thing with the 128, but these are all waveforms generated out of that VE model. Let's see, where is the VE? I've got so many collections now that it's hard to find things. I think they were called VE Explore. What is it called? VE, B, Z, D, E. And I really don't like the fact that the collections window is so small in Modwave. I'm a beta tester. Like I could actually say, hey guys, could you make this bigger? Maybe I should do that, right? Let's see here. Oh, there they are. VE Explore X EXP64 128. So these are wavetables that contain 64 random point waveforms that came out of the 128 model. And so these aren't designed for morphing, but they're designed to get access to, specific waveforms. And they're also sorted. So in the same way that we just saw with the sorted multilinear, the SM lens for 128, these go from a duller timbre to a brighter timbre up here. So, that's something I should have thought of when I did the original Explore 64 wavetables. But you'll find really cool stuff for filtering up here. And you'll find, duller stuff that's like essentially pre-filtered down here at the front of the wavetable, as it were. Now, of course, all this just kind of sounds like a bunch of noise right now because, we haven't really designed a patch for those. But don't be complaining that these all sound the same, okay? Because, like, they don't, and they're radically different waveforms. Like, I don't know. What, do you think that the sawtooth wave sounds like the square wave? Okay, fine. Do what you want to do. Okay, so enough about the new Wavetables. Anyway, there's a ton of great stuff in there, and you know, it's all for exploration and just kind of going through it. We'll play some patches, I guess, a little bit later as well. Now, to also kind of give you more variety, I did go back and was like, oh hey, let's do some new waveform creation techniques. And so there's a couple different things I did that are actually not associated with artificial intelligence. And so there are three, actually four, broad new categories of wavetable and waveform creation techniques that I developed. There's the basic collection. So the basic collection takes random waveforms from the KRC Mathwaves collection and then interpolates them with the basic synthesis waveforms, so sawtooth, triangle, square, and sine, to kind of give some more like bread and buttery kind of stuff. And then there's two versions of a technique that I call Splice, where I actually take random waveforms and splice them together in the time domain using a proprietary technique. And this actually made like a bunch of cool new waveforms. And then there's wavetables that are made out of those. And then I played around with convolution. So convolving two different pairs of waveforms and then making a wavetable out of that. And then also a progressive convolution where we take two waveforms and we take a section of one and ever expanding selection of one, like from the front end all the way to the back end, and convolve that with another waveform and make a wavetable out of that. And that's generated some really nifty new waveforms and wavetables that are less aggressive, than the overall timbre of the KRC Mathwaves set. Certainly not as dominated by bell-like tones, and some interesting waveforms that I've never seen or heard before. So I'll show those in just a second. Okay, so moving on. Let's go up to some patches made with the basic collection. All right, so the idea with the basic wavetables, which when you import them into Modwave or Modwave Native, you'll find in the collection KRC Basic. These are, again, they're made with a randomly selected waveform from the KRC Mathwaves collection, which is then spectrally morphed with one of the basic synthesis waveforms. And they're actually slightly different from the original waveforms because with the spectral morphing, we actually start at like a 10% mix and go to a 90% mix of the final waveform. So you'll see that this waveform never quite gets to exactly a sine. It still has a tiny bit of the properties from the original waveform. And so these are pretty cool. So you can morph across them like without a filter in a way, right? The ones that end in a sine wave. Now this one ends in a square wave, but it's an interesting square wave because it's got some little bumps. And then you'll find, let's see, this is also, oh, that's a square wave. And I think these are only, let's see, how many? Oh yeah, I think they're about 10 frames each. Maybe it's less than that. Maybe it's 6. I can't remember the math that I used. I'd have to go look at my scripts. But anyway, these are small enough that you could probably load a whole ton of these into your hardware Modwave. Of course, in the software world, we don't worry about that. Maybe there's like 5 or 6, I guess. Then we turn our crossfade width up. So there's a lot of like, gentler stuff in here. That, if you're in a boring mood, these... they might float your boat. They're very useful. For standard types of synthesis. Like this is pretty cool because you'll get these ones that go from, one of my sawtooth waves to, a spectrally morphed sawtooth wave. And some dum-dum now is saying, well, that just sounds like everything else. It's because I demo with these kind of long sustains. Anyway, that's the idea behind the basics. And this patch has stretch on. Remove that so that you can hear the true waveforms that are there. Anyway, interesting stuff, right? Okay, the other techniques are the splice techniques. Did I make any patches with splice? I'm not sure if I did. Oh yeah. Where's splice, splice, splice? Thought I did. Well, maybe not. Oh, here we go, resonant splice. So the splice wavetables, and there's 2 sets of them. There's Splice 1 and Splice 2, which used slightly different techniques. The Splice 2 collection takes 2 different waveforms for the start and 2 different waveforms for the end of the wavetable, and it uses this splicing algorithm to insert sections of one waveform into another, and so these kind of are interesting. And the numbers in the file name mean the number of splice points. Not that this is like very descriptive of how they sound, but it at least tells you like, okay, there were like 2 splice points in the start and 2 splice points in the end. There's all sorts of different variations on this. Like this one has 4 splices in the start and 7 splices in the end. And some of these are going to sound very Mathwavesy. I mean, this kind of sounds very Mathwavesy to me, right? There's a bell-like tone and then, more of a standard synthesis waveform. But there's a whole ton of new stuff to explore in here. Let's see. I thought maybe I had... Does Sawmorpher use the splices? No. Anyway, back to the splice idea. Sometimes I just feel like making a video, and so I just make a video. And it's maybe not insanely, well rehearsed. Here's another patch that uses a splice waveform. Now, the other thing I want to stress is, like, when I'm demoing these patches, though, so these patches and these wavetables, Modwave actually lets us have like 4 different layers, but almost everything that I show is actually a single oscillator patch. And in this one, what I've done is, with this particular splice waveform, we're tracking the keyboard for position. So if I play very high, you'll note that the position will go up. And then because of the keyboard tracking as we go down, we're going to get different waveforms. So this is something that I think that oftentimes people forget that they have, or maybe novice synthesis don't even understand that you can do this. But one cool thing you can do with wavetables is you could select what waveform to play based on the key position. And if you have a waveform that's or a wavetable that kind of is a smooth morph, that kind of creates a really interesting instrument where there's an interesting but natural sounding variation across the keyboard. Now, that's something that wouldn't occur in nature, but in synthesis we can do that, and it's a useful technique. So those are the Splice wavetables. And then let's see, do I have any convolution examples? Yeah. So the other new categories are a convolution category, where I took waveforms and convolved them together. You might be familiar with convolution from mathematics, or in the audio realm, you might be more familiar with convolution in the form of convolution reverbs. So basically, convolving two waveforms is a form of advanced filtering. And so back in the hardware sampler days, there was a really cool feature. The first time I ran across convolution was a really cool feature in the hardware EMU 4 series. I had an E4K keyboard, and it had this really neat feature called Transform Multiply. And what Transform Multiply was a way of convolving two audio files. Now, at the time, that kind of mathematics was actually really complicated, and it would take many, many minutes just to convolve two short audio files. But convolution later became used for convolution reverbs, right? You're probably familiar with impulse responses. So if you take a sound, some audio file or even just a waveform, and you convolve it with an impulse response, you hear the sound of that original sound in the space that's represented by the impulse. Now, if we do the same technique with two single cycle waveforms, we're essentially doing a complex form of filtering on them, and we get a new waveform that is sort of imparts the timbral characteristics of one waveform onto the other. And so this is a fairly easy way to make new waveforms that we haven't heard before. So anyway. Now this is a progressive convolution. And so what's happening here is we've got one waveform that's being convolved with another, but one of the waveforms we're just picking portions of, and we start with a small chunk of it. These are actually 4 frames across the wavetable. We take the first 512 samples of one waveform, and we convolve it with the other one, and then we go to 1024, and then to the next one, and then to 2048, right, until we fully convolve the waveform. And it turns out that these are pretty interesting, and they're nicely morphable. I think one thing that's interesting about this particular wavetable is that one of the convolutions is essentially like a square wave. Oops, let's remove the morphing, shall we? So that's pretty wild. So it goes from this to this to this. Pretty nifty. And again, these waveforms might float a classic synthesis boat a little bit more than some of my other ones. But then, oops, let's turn our crossfade width back up. And if you were to sweep these, some of them give you some very interesting textures, but these are a little bit more about finding new waveforms. So you might just use these statically. But it is interesting how different the waveforms can be at different points, and it really depends on what was randomly selected. And there's some interesting phase things that happen in some of them. Oops. I didn't want to change my amp, I want to change my os. Just to slow down that transition a bit. And there are things that end up just like, more like the traditional synthesis waveforms. So this is a kind of a nice addition. I like these quite a bit. Let's remove our filter. And then, depending on your wavetable synthesizer, you might have all these different modifiers. Like a lot of these will respond really well to things like stretch and sync in Modwave. There are similar kind of operations you can do in Vital and in Serum. Okay, so that's the progressive convolution. And then there is the, the M convolution. So this is multiple convolution, and let me explain this one a little bit to you. Let's hear a few. Should make our decay a little faster on the os, huh? So what's going on here is the start and the end are two convolutions. So we take two waveforms, we convolve them together. This is not progressive convolution, but the full waveform. This is the entire 2048 sample waveform. We convolve them together, and then we take another two waveforms at random, convolve them together, and then I use my multiband interpolation technique to create the interstitial frames of the waveform. And so there are several in there. I think it's 8. Maybe it's a different number. So you want to turn your crossfade width up. But the M-band technique, which I described in my first video about KRC Mathwaves, is a spectral interpolation between the start and the end waveforms. But there's a little hitch to it. What we do is we divide the frequency spectrum into bands. You can basically think of them as low, medium, high, and high. And then we pick one of those bands and let the waveform morph with a 1.0 rate. And then the other waveform frequency bands might traverse faster. And so it's a subtle effect, but this gives like a little more variety to like how these waveforms morph than if you just had like a simple 2 waveform start and end wavetable. There's some interesting surprises along the way. And there's thousands of these. Hey, look, you can make a harpsichord out of that. What do you know? So those are the various convolution waveforms. So anyway, between the 2.0, essentially like Ve collection, and the basic wavetables, and the Splice wavetables, and the convolution wavetables, there's another tens of thousands of wavetables available to you in KRC Mathwaves. Like I said, I've kind of stopped counting once I got past 120,000 wavetables, but they are there for you. There's also a free version that contains a few hundred wavetables. I haven't added any of the basic and convolution wavetables to the free version yet. I will probably do that. But there you go. Again, wavetables.lol for all your wavetable needs. I hope you're doing great, and I'll talk to you later. Sorry about this long talky video. Like and subscribe for more talky videos. Never miss a talky video, okay? Catch you later. Bye.